Hey everybody, it's Dr. Christine. Welcome back. I picked today's topic because this is something that I used to do, and it occurred to me if I did it, there are probably thousands or even millions of people out there who are also doing it. And this is relating to the topic of chronic pain or chronic symptoms that are the result of the mind-body connection or neuroplasticity or neural circuit symptoms, or TMS, as Dr. Sarno used to call them. So this is the topic. What if you were to say, but Christine, I'm not afraid, I don't have fear? Well, that's what I used to do until I dug a little bit deeper. Before I share more about that, please take a quick second to hit that subscribe button so that you will not miss future videos as they come out. I've been doing 2 a week lately, and as you listen with repetition to these short, easy to understand videos, it's going to help propel you into a life with less pain and fewer chronic symptoms. All right, so if you're not already familiar with this concept of a bit of an overactive fight or flight system, or this mix-up that happens in the brain that's creating chronic pain or other chronic type symptoms, please go back to some of the earlier videos and familiarize yourself with that core concept, because this video is going to assume you already know that. So as we know, chronic pain or other sorts of chronic nuisance symptoms are not coming from the body. They're coming from a mix-up in the brain, because the brain sort of accidentally got its wires crossed and accidentally taught itself to perceive danger where there is none, and then a result of that is chronic pain or other type of chronic stress symptoms. So guess what? I used to consider myself a person who was not afraid of anything, and I would almost fight for that stance. And I'm embarrassed to say it now because I know better, but I didn't know better back then. I used to sort of look down on fear as if it was, a weakness or something that other people had, but I did not. Hey, I 100% admit that was a ridiculous viewpoint, and I was silly for having it. So it's very common for fear to show up 2 different ways in people. Fear can manifest itself very outwardly, very visibly in people, and these are people who outwardly express fearful thoughts. They might ask questions to get reassurance. They might say that they're afraid of things. They might admit there are things that they don't do because they are fearful, or constantly be looking for guidance, for answers, for reassurance, and making their worries known out loud. So in my mind, that's what fear looked like. Well, guess what? It's just as common for fear to show up in a person more inwardly, and also via resistance and trying to prove the opposite. So this is called counterphobic fear. Counterphobic meaning you're fighting against it. And people who are counterphobic tend to do things to prove that they're not afraid. They might try skydiving, or hey, I did firewalks over hot coals. They might actually engage in reckless behavior, or they might just do things to get an adrenaline rush to prove to themselves, to prove to others that they are not afraid. Or they also might walk around with a puffed up chest, trying to bully other people around, or try to control situations, or trying to prove that they are not afraid. Either way, these are just 2 sides of the same coin. Either way, these are ways that fear can drive behavior in human beings. So I now, looking back, can see that I used to have a very counterphobic approach to life and attitude, and in a way that made my recovery harder, because I didn't believe that I was a fearful person. Now, part of that also is because of societal expectations. It's not glamorous to admit that you're a fearful person, but step away from that stigma, step away from what you've been taught about fear. As a living, breathing organism on this planet, fear is part of our makeup. Human beings have fear, animals have fear. Fear is a survival mechanism. If you really, truly had no fear, you wouldn't probably still be here watching this video. You would have expired a long time ago. And if human beings didn't have fear wired into their systems, human beings probably wouldn't even still exist. So fear is no different than any other survival instinct, like the survival instinct to eat or to reproduce or to seek shelter. So it's normal, okay? So we've got to step away from any labels of good emotions, bad emotions. So if you are the way I used to be and you're insisting that you're not at all driven by fear, that fear just isn't part of who you are, I wrote down a list of some sneaky ways that fear can disguise itself. And let me read this list to you and see if any of these ring true for you. Competitive, perfectionist, comparison, defensiveness, people-pleasing, judging, not trusting others, doing things with hyper intensity, having rituals, eating certain foods or taking a bunch of vitamins or having exercise routines or rituals regarding spiritual practices, anything like that. Having what if type thinking, overthinking, considering yourself a very good problem solver, problem solving too often, and also rigid thinking. So these are all sneaky ways that fear is showing up in your mind and also subsequently in your body, and you might not recognize them as fear. A lot of them come from a core root of maybe fearing you're not good enough. That's going to be the root of competitiveness, perfectionism, people-pleasing, doing things with intensity possibly, problem solving and overthinking. These things are the result of relying on your brain to try to keep you safe, trying to convince yourself that your wits are going to keep you safe when you feel unsafe in the world. Rigid thinking, black and white thinking, can be a fear-based response to not really truly trusting who you are in this world. And there's a fear that you might learn something that rocks that world, right? You think of yourself as a certain way or you identify with something. Well, if that changes, it knocks the foundation right out from under you, and that can be very scary. So just take a couple quiet moments when you're done with this video and ask your inner wisdom, ask that little voice inside of you to maybe point out how fear is showing up in your life in ways that aren't just obviously felt as fear, as fearful. And the reason why you want to do that quick thought experiment, thought exercise, is because when you can shine a light on something, it immediately takes the power away from it. It's like shining a light on something just dissolves away any perceived power that thing had over you. And once you have an awareness, then you can make an empowered choice. Is this the way I want to show up in the world? Is this the sort of person that I want to be? And while at first glance, this may not seem like this has anything to do with the sciatica down your leg or the migraine headaches or the irritable bowel or the gastric reflux that you've been experiencing. Trust that this is something that you can do that's working in the background to dial down the fear, to dial down the fight or flight, to ramp up the parasympathetic part of your nervous system, that is the rest and digest, safety feeling part of your nervous system. And those things over time those things lead to a life with less chronic pain and fewer chronic symptoms. All right, please drop a note in the comments. Have you been like me, trying to fool yourself into thinking that you had no fear in your life? I no longer believe that. I readily admit there are a lot of things in the world that scare me. There are plenty of things that don't scare me. There are plenty of things that do scare me. And guess what? Saying out loud that they scare me seems to take the power away from them. All right, my friends, thanks for being here. I'll see you on the next video. I'm Dr. Christine of Change Your Mind, Change Your Life. Bye-bye.